love handing out jars of Carbone. So, we try to make sure they're stocked. So when people come into a restaurant or whatever, that they have something to give people as they come in. So it's been great in that event. They've tag teamed us on a lot of their events, and that's helped us build. Carbone just makes sure every detail is done right. It's the way they operate, which is great.
Hello, CPGers. Welcome to the Startup CPG Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Scharff. I am really excited for you to hear from today's guest, Eric Skae, who is the CEO of Carbone Fine Food. I actually had reached out to Eric a long time ago because I had seen just his career track record on LinkedIn and thought, I gotta meet this guy and figure out what did he do to have such a cool, varied, interesting career in CPG? And after talking to him, I thought it would just be such a good opportunity for this audience to hear from him as well. You'll get to hear about the beginnings of his career, starting his own distribution up in Florida to running progressively bigger companies and all the way through to creating the Carbone Fine Food pasta sauce with the founders of the restaurant. I hope all of you get as much out of this as I did. Enjoy! All right. Hello, CPGers. Welcome to the Startup CPG Podcast. Today, we are thrilled to have Eric Skae, a seasoned C-level changemaker with a remarkable track record in the CPG industry. Eric has spearheaded transformative initiatives at very well-known companies like New Leaf, Iceland Spring Water, Popcornopolis, Rouse Specialty Foods, leading them through successful sales and rebranding efforts. And now he is the CEO at Carbone Fine Food. Eric leads a team dedicated to crafting super premium pasta sauce that embodies the essence of Carbone restaurants' mid-century elegance meets pop culture. With his expertise in acquisition process leadership, corporate strategy, and brand development, and his commitment to delivering restaurant-quality products, Eric brings a wealth of experience to our discussion on building world-class brands in the CPG space. And I only messed up a little bit saying restaurants. So the rest I nailed. How does that sound to you, Eric? Pretty good overview?
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, we got it all. So, Eric, I was just so excited to have you here on the podcast because, you're somebody that I had just reached out to myself previously because I was so interested in your whole career trajectory and all of the cool stuff you've been able to do. So I was really excited to have you here on the podcast just to tell people a little bit more about it. So do you mind just kind of starting us off, maybe doing a quick little intro and then talking about, hey, real quick, what are you doing now? But let's go quickly back in time to, what got you into the industry in the first place.
All right. So I've been doing this a long time, so I hope we have a lot of time.
We do.
I'm kidding, but I have a 35-year history in the business. And I've always been entrepreneurial. So I used to buy and sell homes in Florida in my 20s. And in 1989, there was a savings and loans crisis where it became very hard to get mortgages for people. So while I was waiting to get my houses sold, the insurance would be canceled, the copper tubing would be ripped out of the house, and so on and so forth. It became a very, very tough business. So I was looking for something to do, and I saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal for a water route. And I was like, well, it's Florida, and you got to remember, this is 89. Bottled water was not in its infancy, but it was only 10 years in plastic or 12 years in plastic. So it hadn't been around for a long time. And I started selling water off a van and created a distribution company in Orlando, Florida. I built it up to 800 accounts. And I was lucky enough to get Arizona iced tea in that process when it was brand new. And my business, that's what got me to 800 accounts. I ended up having to figure out how to route 212 7-Elevens. And if you had a van and it would work for cash, I'd load you up and you'd deliver 7-Elevens for me. So I created that business, and Arizona went to a bigger distributor, which just happens. Didn't have a contract, learned a big lesson. But at the same time, the water company that I was with wanted to transition to Miller Beer distributors. So between a local Miller Beer distributor and a water company I was with, they bought me out. Didn't make a lot of money, but I learned the business, and I called Arizona Iced Tea and was lucky enough to land a job with them. So they moved me from Orlando to Cleveland, Ohio, which initially I thought was punishment because I had flown over to Cleveland once, but had never been there. Ended up managing 6 states for them over a period of time. Then I was recruited as VP of National Accounts to Hanson's, which is my shoulda, coulda, woulda. Mark Hall, who was at Arizona, went to Hanson's, started creating several brands. At the time, there was Hanson's they had Hanson's Functionals, which was an energy, but we also had de-stress and antiox and a bunch of things. And I put these things, I put these new items on shelves nationally in places like 7-Eleven and Walgreens, and they weren't working. And I decided to leave to go to a company called Fresh Cement, and it's why it's my shoulda, coulda, woulda, because Mark created Monster a couple of years later, and I left all my options, and cost of the lesson. And he's done an amazing job. It's amazing what's happened since then. But I went to Fresh Cement after that, which I was director of sales, helped scale that from 5 to about 40 million in under 3 years. They sold to Odwalla, who then sold to Coke. At the end of that process, I went to a 9-company roll-up, which the brand everybody would know would be Naked Juice. I was president of a juice division. I had half the country, and again, Naked being the one that everybody would know. North Castle Partners sponsored that roll-up. After I left there, I had 2 of my own brands, Iceland Spring Water, New Leaf Iced Tea, exited in '08. I will tell you, the 2 places I learned the most in my career were Arizona Iced Tea, from the 0 to $500 million growth in 3 years, because it's sink or swim. And New Leaf Iced Tea, because it's what I call my commercial success, financial failure, because '08 happened, some messiness in the company where I got, hit with some suits that were not anything to do with the company. It was outside of our control, essentially employee doing something way after hours and us getting dragged into it. Let's put it that way. But when you have a $10 million suit and you're trying to raise money and you don't have clearance, you don't have the line of sight as to where the suit's going to go, it's hard to raise money. I managed to keep it alive for several years, and in 2011, finally left. But my board and I just I had a kind of a way I wanted to go. The board had a way they wanted to go, and they had control at the time. So such is life. But I sold Iceland Spring successfully. My partners bought me out there. It was a good run. And then I consulted for 5 years. And that's why I'm excited to be on this show, because during it was actually 6 years. And during those years, the most exciting thing for me was working with startups. So I had clients from startup to Smucker, but I loved working in that startup environment. It was always fun for me. And I could use everything I learned, like creating the New Leaf brand. That, I drew that brand on the back of it. It was funny. I was coming back from Ireland. My mom's from Ireland. So I have a lot of family there and go often. And we were there for my aunt's wedding, and my 2 brothers were on the plane coming back for me. And I had nothing to draw on but the airsick bag. So I have these 2 airsick bags with all these sketches of New Leaf Iced Tea, and it was like, not even existed yet. And I say to my brothers are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm creating my new brand." And my brother John's like, "Yeah, sure you are." And I still have those drawings framed, which is pretty neat. But I learned a lot during the New Leaf time because of some of the failure. Like you learn more in a tough environment than you do in an easy environment. But again, consulted for 6 years and did anything from, writing your business plan, setting up your distribution, to selling your company, or being involved at least in the sale as an advisor, So learned a lot. I learned food there, and I realized that I liked food a lot better than beverage. So I got a call to see if I would take the Rayo's position. It was a tough choice because I had built this consulting firm. My wife was working with me. My sister was working with me. We had 1 employee, but I managed to transition 12 of our clients to other folks when I took the Rayo's job, and then stayed on the boards of the 2 that I couldn't transition because they were early on. And I'm happy to say I'm still on those boards, Riot Energy and Wandering Bear. So it's worked out. I took the Rayo's position, took that through an exit. It was a fast process, and it was a tough turnaround. There was a lot of turnover early on in the Rayo's position just because of circumstances. There was shareholder fight going on that was in the New York Post. We had all sorts of press. One of our shareholders' daughters was Vanessa, who at the time was Vanessa Trump. She's no longer Vanessa Trump. So it just all brought a lot of noise. But I managed to go clean up things there, get it sold. And, I look at it today, and I'm proud to say that I was able to clean that up and sell it, because I see what happened with Rayo's.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. That's already such an incredible track record before even coming to the, success of the gig that you have now. So from those early days then, because you've done it all. You've started from 0, and, you've been at bigger brands as well. Do you have any quick insights from kind of that, like, hey, what are the big things at that early stage that you really need to do to get a brand off the ground? And then also, if you're thinking about that kind of like, Arizona Iced Tea stage, or like, getting that kind of next tier of growth, like what are the things that are going to be important at that stage? If you're a founder just starting a company, thinking about like, all right, what do I need to kill it in the next couple of years? And then what's the next stage after that going to be like?
So it's like I'm at the next stage with Carbone, so it's an easy kind of one to to dive into. But in the early stage, it's a matter of picking the right partners. I always inch wide, mile deep. Everybody gives that advice. No one, including me, follows that advice, but they should. Creating a success story and being hyper focused on velocity. I don't care if it's one store. Go out and prove that the brand can sell and actually can grow from a velocity standpoint before you go scale. So like I like picking one or two markets and really, really focusing on those one or two markets, or sometimes channel specific. Really depends on the brand. If you're in the clear pioneering stage, and let's say you're going into a category that hasn't been premiumized yet, right? That hasn't hit that point, then stick with specialty and really beat it in specialty and make sure you have velocities there before you go to conventional or club or mass. The next stage of the business, and I'm there now. It's where I'm kind of hyper focused. I'm hyper focused on margin. It is the most fundamental thing that you have to get right, and you have to know you're going to get it right from the early stages. I love people who say, "I'm going to get there with volume." Well, you better understand how you're going to get there with volume. So you better know where your price breaks are on cans and glass and ingredients and production and co-packing and so on and so forth. And if you don't, it's going to be a tough road because volume doesn't always get you margin, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And like I learned quite a bit about that starting Carbone. I mean, I had the manufacturing margins that I needed right in the beginning.
One thing you mentioned, yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing you mentioned I wanted to come back to is you said you like like a local or regional strategy, starting in one or two areas and really proving the velocity. And then you also mentioned another strategy that can be kind of like specialty or natural that probably is broader, a bigger area. What do you think if you're a new brand considering one of those two approaches? Would one of them be right for certain kinds of products? Like I mean, probably most people listening to this are making some kind of a premium product.
Sure.
So, where would you recommend, hey, just really stay in your own backyard and grow it there versus, yeah, maybe consider looking regionally or nationally at some of the natural grocers?
Look, I mean, I think you stay in your own backyard, and if you have the ability to start small and really small, do it off your own trucks. Like if you're in a market that has good independent markets where you can go out and really, really learn your brand, try to do it yourself if you can. I mean, I think back to like Fresh Samantha and Naked Juice, starting Naked in New York, where I had my own trucks and I had the ability to kind of really, really do whatever I needed to with the brand and learn the brand. That was a brand that went from zero to $10 million in New York in under a year. And we launched the week before 9/11, 2001. So we had a lot going against us. Now I will tell you, it also comes back to team. And the guy who led that initiative for me is a guy named Chris Bajuk, who now has been at Doris for the last 20 years and is an amazing strategist when it comes to how you attack CPG in New York City, right?
How do you? How do you? I'm curious. What do you think? What are some answers to that?
I can't give you the secret sauce today because it's been years, right? Like,
What
so
was it then? Yeah, back then. So like
so
those
at
early days.
that time, Chris quadrant off Manhattan. It was before Brooklyn became a thing, right? Like there was a couple of pockets of Brooklyn that were there, and we had those areas covered, but it wasn't like where everybody migrated to Brooklyn yet. So he kind of quadranted off the city and really attacked the Upper West Side, Lower East Side, and Village, and hammered the hell out of those areas. So like we definitely opened accounts in Midtown, but we didn't focus on Midtown. We also had 10 trucks running around that were branded that you saw it every day. Like, every day our trucks were visible, but just hyper focused on the areas that kind of were brand building areas at that time. Now, again, it's changed. I'd have to get in and dive into New York and say, okay, I'm going after Dumbo and I'm going after Park Slope and I'm going after parts of Queens now, which you didn't have to back then.
You know
Uh,
what? It's pretty
Different.
interesting to hear you say that, though, is thinking about New York because, yeah, if you have branded trucks and you're focusing on a couple different areas, they're like slow moving billboards because they're going to be sitting in traffic a lot of time. Like people are out in the street a lot walking places, or they're in a car that's also moving slowly. And it's not like if you get a billboard here in LA, someone's going to whiz by it and maybe they see it, maybe they don't. Like in New York, it's just going to sit there for a long time. It's going to be parked outside the store that they're going into. So I could see that being a pretty interesting part of the strategy, especially the way you're talking about it of like, yeah, and it's not just all of New York. Like we're picking specific neighborhoods inside of Manhattan and really penetrating those first. That's pretty cool to hear about.
Yeah,
And I
I mean,
know I,
look, I couldn't get Boxy. I have 4 trucks running around New York with Boxy right now, and I couldn't get them to brand the top of the trucks. I would have liked that because of everybody looking down as well.
oh, that's so funny to think about. Oh my gosh. So, cool. All right. Sorry to drill you on specifics of things from 20 years ago, but where our people I think are very interested in that like street level approach. Okay. So then, so coming back up then to kind of that next phase of growth then. So when people are looking ahead after conquering that early stage, like getting, into your local area and really just crushing it, like, yeah, what do you need to be doing then for that to really unlock the next big stage of growth?
So, I mean, you got to start and make sure you have the right margins, right? Because we can talk about it whenever, but the what I call the WIIFM, which I did learn, funny enough, from Mark Hall at Monster. Everybody wants to know what's in it for me, and because you've got to pay your brokers, you've got to pay your employees, you've got to have margin for the distributor, you've got to have margin for the chain, and at the end of the day, you've got to get to the most important person, which is the consumer. It all costs money, and you've got to make sure that there's enough margin in that pool to do it. So like I'm hyper focused on COGS because look, I started Carbone. The first bottles went on the shelf under 3 years ago, March 1st of 2021. We're in 20,000 doors right now, and in the next couple of months, we'll be in 25,000 doors. We're launching Walmart. It was very, very, very fast growth. I started with the right margins, and then the supply chain world fell apart. Like, freight from Italy went through the roof. Tomatoes, doubled in price. Olive oil is an issue now. This, that, the other thing. So I've had to fight it on both ends. I've managed to pick up a lot of the margin, but I'm still not back to where I was when I started this 3 years ago from a manufacturing margin standpoint. And if I went there, my price would be too high at the shelf. So like it's so focus on COGS, and your pricing is one of the most important things to do. Always go back to Dr. Richardson's book on, scaling your brand. Like that book will tell you, always look at your 4 Ps, like constantly. Is my product right? We know our product's right, right? Is our pricing right? That's an area where I'm working on. So I got to look at it east to west, because I'll see my brand anywhere from $8.99 to $14.99. Right.
Got it. So, and I mean, I think something really interesting about the Carbone brand, and I want to get into the process of starting it also and what that was like. But, the first time that you see Carbone and the label, like it just looks iconic. It looks familiar and like premium, right? Which is not an easy thing to do as a new brand. Like, how exactly did you guys accomplish that, and how much of it relies on the reputation of Carbone, which I honestly only really knew because I lived in Miami and people would talk about it as a restaurant. And then finally I went there and was like, I wanted to hate it because of all the hype around it, but oh my God, it was good.
Yeah.
The spicy rigatoni pasta or something. It was mind blowing. And the focaccia bread was unreal. So, but like there are plenty of people who don't live in, Miami or New York or Las Vegas or wherever all the locations are. But I suspect they would still have that same feeling about the brand, looking at it, that it's just sort of like a little old world, but very high quality and premium. And it just looks like it's going to be really good. Like, how did you guys accomplish that?
I think it was, I mean, I hate to say this, but this time around, they took a shortcut, right? I didn't draw it on the back of an airsick bag like I did New Leaf. So I met the Carbone guys, and Jordan Gaspar from Excel actually introduced me to Mario initially, and I will always appreciate her for that. And, she said, hey, would you be interested in meeting Mario Carbone? And I had never thought about going back into pasta sauce, because once you did something once, I don't know, doing it twice. But I had gone to Carbone for my daughter's 25th birthday when I was running Rayo's. And honestly, when she told me where she wanted to go, my exact response is, are you effing kidding me? And she correctly said, Dad, people your age go to Rayo's, people my age go to Carbone. And she goes, and I've been to Rayo's already. So I ended up taking her to Carbone, remembered the experience. But when I got that call, I'm like, yeah, I can build something on that. So a lot of the elements that you've asked about, such as the label, were already in place. That label is the menu at Carbone. That's the picture of the menu. And I'd love to say I was the brilliant guy who said, let's put that on the label. But as I was as I bring in a branding expert and I, do everything I do to wow my new partners, Mario, Rich, and Jeff Zelaznik, who is one of the partners of Major Food Group, said to me, "We've already got the label done. It's our menu." And that was that. It was as simple as that. And I looked at it and I go, wow, no one has a label like that. And I picked the background colors, I picked some of the colors, but the branding was essentially done for me from a label standpoint. The interesting thing is, though, household awareness of Carbone, to your point, wasn't as high as I thought it would be. My son went to St. Joe's in Philly, which is a food marketing school. I want to say he had 5 couples over, so or 6 couples actually. And out of the 6 couples, one of them knew Carbone, and these were all food marketing majors. And the one who knew Carbone happened to have moved to Manhattan after college, but no one in Philly really knew the brand. That said, I think because it's Carbone, because we can do things in, that it's very tough for Senator store brands. We get a lot of publicity on this brand. We've managed to grow household awareness now over the last 3 years, and are really consciously talking about restaurant quality. The brand has to stand alone. It's got to stand away from the restaurant, but we will never do anything as a brand that would hurt that restaurant. So anything we put in a jar has to be restaurant quality. And to that point, like Rich Teresi and Mario Carbone, who are the 2 award-winning chefs, arguably like top Italian chefs in the world, right? Every single new item goes through them first. And they are really, really serious about it, which is great to have them as partners doing that.
And so, yeah, obviously, you were coming in with a ton of credibility. So, not surprising at all that they would want to have a meeting with you. But what did it take to actually convince them? I'm assuming that you probably built a business case around it and just showed them some really compelling data for why this would be a good use of their time, and a safe play for their brand. So, what did you do to bring them along that journey, and what were those discussions like?
It wasn't a lot of convincing. I think they had gotten to a point where they said, okay, we see what's happened with CPG brands, restaurant brands. We see there's an opportunity there. Sauce is a place that's obvious to start. And I think, when they saw my background with Rayo's, and they said, okay, we've got someone who finally knows the category, which is, I think, one of the main things they wanted to make sure they had in place. I actually know that. One of the main things they wanted to have in place was the right person. And because I've never seen 3 guys they're in their early 40s. I don't think I've met anybody as driven in my life, and I've met a lot of driven people. So they have a million opportunities, right? And they work on a million opportunities. Right now they're building clubs and restaurants and a high-rise building in Miami, and Mario's got a clothing company. It goes on and on and on. But I think they're very smart in a sense that they wait for the right opportunity to present itself. And I think me coming in, Rayo's having grown so much, clearly no number 2 in premium, super premium behind Rayo's. I wouldn't even consider myself number 2 yet, right? Because there's so much distance between us and them. But we are clearly the number 2 super premium brand, kind of over $7.99, but there's still a great deal of distance between us and them. And that's where I saw some white space. Everybody needs a competitor. You don't have a competitor, you don't grow.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. So then, just digging more into once you got started with Carbone, what was that like? Probably a lot of things were, secondhand to you, just having done them fairly recently. But what was it like to just kind of start from scratch again and get the product made and, get into retail and, light back up your old networks and partners? What was that process like?
I've never had a gap in the industry where I've had time off. So my contacts are always pretty fresh, right? So I don't have to re-engage with a lot of people. They're people I've kept in touch with. But I signed my agreement with them on October 29th of 2020. And by March 1st of 2021, we were on the shelves in our first customer, which was Stop and Shop. I bought on as a consultant, and I was a consultant because we didn't even have a company yet at that point. Someone named Barbara Omoyo, who worked with me at New Leaf Iced Tea, Iceland Spring, Rayo's, and now here. And Barbara and myself, almost all the way up to launch, did it 100% ourselves. We hired no one else. So it was her and I. It was the chefs, while I was doing trial and error, getting in their car in New York at 3:30 in the morning to meet me in Pennsylvania at 6 in the morning for production runs to make sure we had it dialed in. So Mario and Rich were there tasting batches with me. And the things that I had to get used to doing again, when I took over Rayo's, it was developed already. So I didn't have to I didn't have to go to the extent that I did at Carbone. For the first year, 187,500 cases were produced. I tasted every single batch. I did 100,000 miles on United and did not leave the country. Now, that's my fault. I live in Vegas. Production was in Pennsylvania at the time. But every single batch before it got jarred, I tasted. And these are the things that it takes to really launch a brand and make sure that you're doing it right.
What do you think that they were looking for in the sauce as compared to what they would be serving in their restaurant? Like, I mean, is it exactly the same, like the quality and taste that you'll get, or are there some differences, or what were you trying to?
You'll
What,
never get 100% the same because they're two different, like if I move from your kitchen to my kitchen, it's not going to be 100% the same. There's some advantages to commercial cooking versus kitchen cooking because regulation of heat is much easier, right? You've got steam jacketed kettles that you're getting uniform heat all the way around, where controlling heat is a big thing when it comes to cooking in a restaurant. But, we took their recipe and adapted it for commercial cooking. So we wanted it as close to the essence of the restaurant as we possibly could. And that's what we've accomplished.
Amazing. All right. So, and then how easy was it for you to line up retailers to jump on board? It sounds, I mean, you were hitting retail within 6 months, which is pretty awesome. I mean, were they just saying yes because they knew you and your track record, and it just was a no brainer because of the brand, or they were really eager for a competitor for that particular segment of the category, or how did that go?
I think it was a combination of all, taking the Carbone, building that story. So even though those who didn't know it, there was enough press about the restaurant where I could build a really sexy story. There was enough social, just like at the time, I think Mario Carbone had 20,000 followers on Instagram. He's well over 100 now. But just to give you an example of the power of Mario and the base that he does have, we put out a post on March 1st that we launched, and you could buy direct to consumer, and I had $80,000 in orders in 4 days. Now I had to learn how to, Barbara, actually, who I've mentioned earlier, had to become a packaging engineer because she had to figure out how to make a box where things weren't going to break, because our breakage was through the roof on those 80,000 dollars in orders. But it was a nice way to launch, and it helped us scale where we were able to get direct to consumer and get the consumers outside of that Stop and Shop footprint early on, and then take that and kind of build it from there. I mean, but some of the accounts that I would have thought would have jumped on immediately, like I built this brand and said, this is perfect for Whole Foods. And they were resistant. It took me over a year to get attention, and like I almost took it personally, because when I counted companies that I've been on the board with, companies I've run, whatever, I've been involved in 21 brands that have been put in Whole Foods in this 33-year period of time, or 35-year period of time. You'd think I could have gotten a call back. And don't get me wrong, they were going through a lot at the time as well, where they were down buyers and so on and so forth. So I kind of understood. But some of the ones I thought would be easy were very difficult. Some of the ones I thought would be hard came easy. So,
and like this, so I'm trying to remember exactly what the timeline was, but there was a period, I think it was 2022 at least, when I was like really ramping up sales, where it was like the great buyer turnover period, and everybody was switching desks, and they were changing structure and downsizing, and everyone was just moving, and you'd like work for 6 months to finally get a meeting, and then it's like, psych, start from the beginning,
yeah.
new buyer now.
21 and 22. That's what was going on during that period of time, and Whole Foods was dealing with quite a bit of that, and it became a tough one. Now, that said, finally broke in. We're the number 2 brand there. Number 3, if you look at 365. So it's Rayo's private label and us at this point, from what I can see, which is a nice place to be.
And then, so probably one of the things that helped you get their attention was just how interested and engaged consumers were with your product. Man, honestly, I don't cook a ton at home, so I don't have a lot of pasta sauce here. But just, looking at your brand, I assume you kind of probably had that like Erewhon effect of people just posting about you online, which is not something that consumers probably do a lot for pasta sauce. But I imagine just because, people do, if you go to Carbone, the restaurant, you're going to post a picture probably to social media. Were you finding people were doing that a lot with the pasta sauce? And was that having an effect on retailers?
Yes, and it's still happening. We've got a pretty good social game in terms of kind of, how we attack it. And we do, I'm grateful to anybody who posts. but we do get quite a few people that post because look, we have a brand that people want to be associated with, which I think is great. I'm happy with it. I mean, you mentioned Erewhon. They've been a tremendous partner. Like Vito could not have been better. But it's where I launched the brand in California, and you know, didn't give them an exclusive, but essentially they were exclusive for 6 months, and the brands never looked back. We're the number one brand in there, and have continued to be able to hold that, and really, really, I appreciate all my retailers, but I appreciate the partnership of Vito.
And I've launched Air One before and, spent a lot of time demoing in the stores. Did you have to do specific things to support the brand there, or did it just hit a need and it just started flying?
So we did a big launch party there at the Pacific Palisades store, and we had 750 people show up. I had flew Mario out. We brought chefs in. We recreated our spicy vodka using arrabbiata at the event. So that's kind of how we launched Erewhon, and it's worked ever since. Now that said, we promote. We do their end caps. We work with them every way we can to kind of grow our business, as we do with all our retailers.
So was there something about this category that made it so ripe for a really premium brand to just come in and resonate so well? Like, do you think that there are other categories in food that like maybe wouldn't have that kind of appetite? Whereas, like, you look at a Carbone jar, it's just like that looks amazing. Of course, I want that. So, do you think there's something about sauce that makes people want a premium option so much?
I think so. It's not as heavy private label as most categories, but there's been a premiumization going on in a lot of different categories. Like we saw it in ice cream, going all the way back to Ben and Jerry's, right? Like they might have been the pioneers of premiumization, like, and taking a category and really kind of driving that category up. I think every category it can happen, right? And I think it has happened in an awful lot of categories. Pasta sauce was already there. I mean, Rayo's was already there. I just think it was ripe. I think Rayo's was ripe to have a competitor. Is the way I look at it. And don't get me wrong, there are competitors to Rayo's, but I think they were ripe to have someone compete with them that had kind of the same stature from a restaurant standpoint, or maybe even maybe even a little higher, just because of the amount of restaurants that Carbone has and where. Like Carbone's got a Hong Kong restaurant, and they've got. I think there was an announcement the other day about the UK, and there's restaurants in the Middle East, Carbone branded restaurants. So a little bit of a bigger footprint and a little more of a global recognition.
So has this success surprised you at all? Has it been just kind of what you expected, and you've done this before and you could see that when you were pitching this idea, like, no, this is how it's going to go, and I have a pretty good understanding of that? Or has it gone like, even better, and you kind of had to scramble to keep up with it? Or, how has it been compared to your dreams and expectations when you were launching?
So when you start anything, there's always apprehension about where it's going to go. If I didn't think I would be where I am today, I would not have done this. I had a lot of options on things to do. Going back to a startup after taking Rayo's and Popcornopolis through a successful, very successful exits, the path for me was to dive into a couple of established companies and do a couple of more exits. I turned 60 this past year, so I'm not doing this forever, right? So to go back and do a startup like at the time at 58, there was days I said, am I out of my mind? But I saw I saw this platform that I can build off. As we discussed, not everybody knows Carbone, but there was enough people that knew Carbone that was something to build off. And that's what we've done, and it has worked. And, household awareness just continues to grow on the brand because of what we've been able to do in press. Spicy vodka launch. Like these are things I've never seen before. Spicy vodka launch, which was July of this year, 23. In the first 60 days, I want to say we had 4 billion impressions in media.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen. Like, it just doesn't happen. We sent out a beautifully branded box where when you open it up, it had the Carbone neon light inside, and it had jars of sauce inside. And we sent it out to influencers, and like some of the posts that we got were amazing. Major, major influencers like
Yeah.
Bobby Flay, like,
Yeah.
threw
What?
it up on TikTok, and just like the interesting thing of that is I can see the sales spike in spins from those things happening.
Yeah. That's something like that is probably something that an early brand would dream of doing, but they'd be very worried about the costs of it. For you starting this, how did you line up the financing for it? Was it pretty easy for you to do based on your track record? Or, where were you looking to fundraise?
Look, my partners bought in a family office. I did the pitch, but they made the introductions. I wouldn't have known this family office, and the family office has been best financial partner I've ever had. So it's a good situation. Um, Very supportive board. They recognized that they didn't have the expertise in CPG, so they gave up one of their board seats to someone they knew named Tom Corley. Tom was president of revenue at Kraft. He has been a tremendous board member to me. And anytime I have a question about a retailer or even need an introduction, he has picked up the phone and made those introductions at some major chains across the country. So Tom's been helpful, and it's one of those things. I mean, I would say at the end of the day, this was still a startup. It was from bottle one, right? It's a startup, but I had a lot of things going in that I would have loved to have had in past startups, right? Like really supportive board, good family office with backing, a brand already. Like I didn't have to do a ton. I had to do some positioning work as to how we were going to position the brand, but a lot of the assets were already there, such as the label,
Yeah.
and just events that they're doing, and I get to leverage some of their events. Like Mario, Jeff, and Rich are the three partners at Major Food Group. Love handing out jars of Carbone. So we try to make sure they're stocked, so when people come into a restaurant or whatever, that they have something to give people as they come in. So it's been great in that event. They've tag teamed us on a lot of their events, and that's helped us build.
Yeah. I remember when I saw you at Fancy Foods in Las Vegas, you said, I think I tried to invite you to an event we were doing, and you said, I'm hosting 5 dinners and 3 nights at Carbone here. And I was like, oh my gosh, that must be such a cool experience for a buyer to get to come and check out your brand in the environment where it came from. Like, I mean, what an ideal scenario to be introducing people to your brand. When I used to work in food tech, we would always try to get buyers to come into the office so we could just really show them what the company was all about and the vibe of it, and where the products came from, and experience the culture of the company. But I mean, how could it be better than bringing buyers to a restaurant like that where the product actually comes from?
It's the best asset that I have. I love hosting dinners at Carbone, and it's funny. You would think the experience would be better because I was there. The experience is the same for everybody. Right, Carbone just makes sure every detail is done right. It's the way they operate, which is great.
Well, if you launch the focaccia bread at some point, I'll definitely be a buyer of that.
Yeah,
I promise you that.
If I could ever figure out how to do the croutons in their Caesar salad, that would be a home run.
So let me ask you a couple other questions, kind of just from your career in general. So, I mean, one is, so you're on a couple boards, right? Like you were talking about how much you value great board members. What is it that you try to do when you're on the board of a company? What are the specific things that you feel like you can be the most valuable to do? And what are the things that you're looking for from the company?
Because I've got experience across all kind of segments, whether it be ops, finance, sales. It's a kind of a board by board discussion because it comes down to what the needs of that particular board are. But I just try to be helpful with more with introduction, strategy, planning, in those areas. But I will go to the level of if someone's making a key hire, I want to interview them for them. So I'll get involved at that level and make sure they're making the right decisions.
And what are you looking for from people usually? Is it like you really just want to know about their expertise, or are you pretty interested in checking culture fit, or any kind of key things? Probably it's the same stuff you look for when you're.
I'm probably bad on the culture fit side, just because I remember Mark Hall, one thing he said to me back in the Hanson's days. He's like, everybody has their own personal brand, and your personal brand is hard work. Because I work. So I'm looking for someone who's got grit, it doesn't necessarily mean, so I probably should look more at culture. I don't think about those things, but I like people who work hard, who are grit, who think fast, right? You've got to be able to make quick decisions in this business, right? And you got
And
to
how do
make
you
smart, quick decisions.
and
So
how do you screen for that in an interview other than just, getting a sense for them? Are there any specific
generally it's
ways?
just a sense, and it's general conversation. And I based it on the fact that, while I've been doing this for 35 years, my career is over 40, and I've worked with I've worked with and hired a lot of people. So I can generally get a sense whether what I'm hearing is accurate or not.
Great, cool. And then so also, when you're in the past, you were tasked to go in and turn around a company. What's your playbook for something like that? Like, what are you? I probably got to look at everything, but are there top couple areas you're expecting to find opportunities for the company?
So it's really hard, and it's dependent on on the particular company that you're going to. So when I went into Rayo's, there was a shareholder battle going on. So the first thing I had to solve was a shareholder battle, right? Had 90 days to do that, got that done. But then I started looking at the sales and seeing where gaps were, and had a head of sales there named Jim Morano, who was also a shareholder. It was a weird situation. I reported to Jim as a board member. He reported to me as head of sales, and we made it work. We really made it work well. But Jim, it was more of a divide and conquer. So he was really sharp. So we kind of looked at sales, but where he didn't have the expertise, like a Whole Foods or like an independent distributor network in New York, I kind of handled that. But first and foremost, started with the shareholder battle there. But then we looked at, okay, where's the low hanging fruit to fix things? So like one example I always use with Rayo's was down 6% in target when I took it over. And within the first year, we were up 81%. And I'd love to say I was the genius behind that, but Jim just identified we had so many voids when it came. Once you got beyond marinara, we had so many voids. Just fixing those voids, we knew we were going to get growth. So we were able to do it. But you have to look at everything from the manufacturing to the sales, and then you got to figure out where your most critical points are to go fix first, and just take
How do
them
you,
one at a time.
how do you actually identify voids at a place? I mean, that sounds so impactful. Like, is it because you're sending in merchandisers, or you're looking at the sales data? What's a way you can see something
This
like
was
that?
all data driven and broker interviews. I mean, I remember it kind of clear as day. First off, like when I took that Rayo's job, they gave me a mountain of paper that I had to go through, and I was going through a 25-year history of a brand. So like I have letters going back. I had at the time letters going back to 1992 that I had to kind of understand, this brand, and I read through all of that information. But then we just really, really broke down the data and went account by account and went all the way anywhere from a 10-store chain to a 2,000 store chain.
All right. So, Eric, what a cool career that you have already had and continue to have. What do you think that there's anything that you would do differently other than, trying to hold on to some equity for our Monster, which I think was like 50 billion market cap last time I
Yeah,
checked? Like, anything you would try to do sooner or differently, or just like maybe would you have a different perspective on things, or, ways you've learned to, kind of like when you're working so hard and getting through everything, like a perspective you wish you had had that would have made it easier for you, or anything like that?
I think about that quite a bit, and I'm not sure that I could be doing what I do today if I didn't have the experiences that I had in the past. So like some of the challenges that I faced at Newly, for example, where I learned a lot, or that fast growth at Arizona Iced Tea. If I didn't have those things, I wouldn't be able to do what I can today. Like I even think about like financial modeling. It's an area where I've got some strength. If I didn't take the Naked Juice job and meet Brad Barnhorn in 1998, who sat in a lobby of a hotel, like teaching me how to build the financial model from the first sell, I'm not sure I could do what I do today, right? So like when I think about all of it, it's just that it all built upon each other. Sure, I wish I would have held on to some equity or hung around a Monster, but hey, I've done okay. I've done okay not doing that. So yeah, I'm not sure I'd change much.
And then, okay, if you meet, a fresh-faced college grad eager to get into the industry who hopes to someday get to lead a company like you're doing now, what kind of advice are you giving them?
Meet as many people as you can, develop a network across the country, right? So know people, work with those people, like call your friends, right? That's where you're going to learn. This is what I love about what you're doing with Startup CPG. So if you think about what do I wish I had? I wish I had Startup CPG like 30 years ago. I really do, because I remember starting my consulting practice, and I'm like running around Expo West, going to every booth, trying to pick up clients. And a buddy of mine said to me, "What the heck are you doing?" He's like, everybody, go to your friends. They'll get you your clients. And they did. So like building that network and like, and making it a two-way street with people. It's not like you can be calling someone for advice all the time without them calling you. So having that network that you can lean on, that can lean on you, and being open to do those things, I think that's kind of the most important key to success. I talk about this with a lot of friends of mine. It's like, at this point, at least in CPG, I feel like I'm 1 degree of separation from anybody that I got to get to, because I have friends that can help get me there.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing to remember. And, I always like to think of, just, everybody should be working hard at what they're doing, but also like, yeah, take your head out of the sand every once in a while, look around and connect with people at other companies. In my last role as CEO, I wanted my team every week to just pick up the phone and network with somebody new for an hour, because you just don't know what kind of stuff you're going to hear about, and, just make friends that way. And yeah, your friends can help you.
Yes.
And just, it's such an important, I would say, muscle memory to have, like a reflex being call your friends, like when you have a problem. And I think, that is the basis for our whole community, is like, gosh, we can all help each other, and people like to, and, it feels good. And then obviously it feels really good when you need the help and you reach out and someone just has that answer or the right connection for you, and feels good for them too, especially if it's easy for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the challenges I have, just from a time standpoint. Like, I wish I had more time in the day, because I do get a lot of early stage entrepreneurs call me and say, "Hey, can you give me some advice?" And I try to be as generous with my time as I can. Like you called me, right? Like, we didn't know each other. I got on the phone with you. I will do that wherever I can. Unfortunately, there's just not enough time in the day, and I can't do it as much as I'd like to. Maybe that's after this someday. Maybe I'll be just a mentor.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, that is also a lot of the spirit of this podcast is, I hope for all the people who do want to pick your brain, that they'll be able to maybe listen to this first also and hear, at least get a baseline. And then if they approach you, then after that, they can ask some stuff that we didn't cover, but I think we covered a lot. So I think that's probably a pretty good place for us to wrap up here. Eric, thank you so much. I think it's just going to be really incredibly helpful for a lot of brands to get to hear more about your journey. And, like I mentioned before, like I had reached out to you just blindly on LinkedIn because I had seen your profile and track record and was like, man, like what a cool career that is. I would love to just try to understand how I could try to have something that's like that, that's so interesting, and, get to do all these different kinds of roles, and obviously hope to have the kind of success that you've had. So, thank you. I think I'm definitely getting a lot of takeaways from this, and especially that power of the network. So thank you so much for joining us. And, if people just kind of want to follow along with you, is it good for them maybe just to try to follow you on LinkedIn, something like that?
Hit me on LinkedIn. I check it every day. So, and I do my best to respond to everybody. It's getting really, really hard with SEO providers and Amazon providers and so on, because I get so many of them a day. So I can't answer them all. I was at a point up until a year ago where I answered every one of them. I can't do it anymore. But hit me on LinkedIn. I will respond.
Awesome. All right, Eric, thank you so much. Hope to see you at Expo and a bunch of other cool industry events coming up later this year. And yeah, thank you again so much for your time, and to everyone for listening.
All right. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right.
Thanks, man.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today, it would really help us out if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Daniel Scharff. I'm the host and founder of Startup CPG. Please feel free to reach out or add me on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And reminder to all of you out there, we would love to have you join the community. You can sign up at our website, startupcpg.com, to learn about our webinars, events, and Slack channel. If you enjoyed today's music, you can check out my band. It's the Super Fantastics on Spotify Music. On behalf of the entire Startup CPG team, thank you so much for listening and your support. See you next time.